Hey, welcome back to the blog. Another devotional coming at you today. So last time I posted, I was talking about First Peter chapter 2, verse 11 to 25. I was originally happy with what I'd written, and then I just kind of got the feeling like maybe it was a little too, I don't know, a little too sad or depressing or I don't know, negative. And I feel like sometimes maybe it's easy to get down on the world when, you're in the midst of something like COVID-19, which is keeping us all cooped up, except for those of us that it's not keeping cooped up. I think of all the books in the Bible, my favorite is probably Mark's Gospel and probably First Peter. I kind of like the gritty feeling that they have, the somewhat unpolished appearance. These things tend to make sense to me for some reason. Sometimes the other writers can be confusing, but Mark and Peter, they just sometimes just kind of lay it out there. Well, I don't want to, I don't want to be too long today, so I'm just going to kind of get right to what it is that I want to say. The other day, I kind of laid out, the world that we live in. It wasn't a pretty picture. It was not flattering of the world. And then Peter gets to the middle of chapter 2 and he says, you're a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession. He says, once you were not a people, but now you are. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have. So the lay of the land is that the world really doesn't give a rip about the chosen people. And secondly, we are God's special possession within this world that doesn't give a rip about us. He didn't spirit us away after our baptisms or rapture us out of it. He left us here. He left us with his presence to walk a narrow path and to learn how to have faith. So with all that in mind then, and you have to see the other part to get a real grip on it, how does Peter say that the royal priesthood is supposed to live in this world? Well, verse 11, the first thing he says, dear strangers, I urge you to live as foreigners and exiles. So the first thing he says here is that we're to live, as exiles, strangers, foreigners, strangers in a strange land, lost and far from home. And I think what this simply means is don't get comfortable here. Don't think that just because you live in Rome that you have to do what the Romans are doing. Abstain from sinful desires. Second thing he says, live good lives. Now, if the first portion is telling us what not to do, then the second portion here is telling us exactly what it is that we should do. Live good lives. Live in a way that when the pagans see you, they see that there's something different about you and about your life and the one to whom you owe allegiance. I'm not going to parse out the word good for you. I think in some ways, this is a term that we all kind of really need to figure out for ourselves, but we do so within the confines of the gospel. Third thing, verse 13, live submissive lives. I'm not going to parse this out either. It just seems to me, however, that in this context, Peter is telling us how to proactively live under an oppressive government condition. I suppose in America, this is probably far too easy. But I think the short and long of it is that we're just not supposed to be troublemakers, not rabble-rousers. Live quiet, peaceful lives, obedient to the just laws of the land and those who enforce them. Fourth thing he says, live as free people. No one owns you. No one owns me. We're free to come and go as we please. We're free to do anything that we want. Paul says all things are permissible, even if not all things are beneficial to the body. A lot of stuff that's in this world, however free you may be to do it, is going to wreck your body, wreck your soul, wreck your heart, wreck your family, wreck your mind. Peter says later on that we're supposed to be alert and sober because the devil wants to eat us for lunch. Live freely. But also, he says, fifth, in verse 16b, he says, live as God's slaves. Well, we'd need to go through the whole Bible to unravel what this means. How do you live as God's slaves? What does this mean? How do we even use this kind of language, in a world such as America with our history? Does it mean go read your Bible, go to say your prayers, go to church? I'll tell you, I'll let you kind of figure out what it means. But again, I think that prayer and fasting go a long way towards helping us to understand what the point here is. Sixth, in verse 18 to 22, live sacrificially. To this you were called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. Our lives are marked by the cross. We take up our cross, we follow Jesus. There's simply no way around it, no way to escape this aspect of the Christian life. There's simply no other way for us to live except as crucified people. Our lives are poured out as we live redemptively, making the most of the time, for the days are evil. Seventh, verse 23, live faithfully. And this is a theme over and over again in the Psalms. And what it means is, here, God, I entrust myself to you. Lord, hear me when I cry out. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. For God is with me. People are going to spit on you. They're going to hate you. They're going to, be mean to you. That's the land that you live in. But the people of God entrust themselves to the Father, even as Jesus did. 8, verse 24, live for righteousness. Live for what is right and good. The righteous will live by faith. The just will live by faith. Jesus suffered the cross, Peter writes, so that we might die to sins and live for righteousness. Over and over again, he tells us our lives are marked by the fact that we are done with sin, done with unrighteousness, done with the things that, give the Lord a bad name, done with the things that make pagans slander God, done with things that lead to dishonor and death. We're done with all these things. 9th, verse 25, live as sheep. And I know it's mostly a joke to the outside world when we Christian people talk about, being sheep. Sheep are dumb and blah, blah. Well, but look at it this way. Here's what Peter's saying. He's saying, we have a shepherd, we have an overseer, but what does the world have? The world has the world. They have each other. They have tyrants who enslave them. They have despots who crucify them. They have pagans who lie to each other. They have despots who crucify them. They have rulers who mercilessly insult those whom they dislike. And there is only one way that the people in the world who do these things can escape, and that is, frankly, to become just like us. We have a shepherd, a great shepherd, in fact. We have someone who cares for us, who watches over us, who guards us, guides us, leads us, rewards us. And to be sure, he has trailblazed ahead of us so that we know exactly what to expect. He's sympathetic because he's been there. This is what Hebrews tells us. And so it means that we're not going it alone. This is what it means to live as foreigners and exiles in this land here on earth, that we've returned to him. Our lives are supposed to be signposts to others, pointing the way, inviting them also to be a part of the flock, living in such a way that God's name is glorified among us. I like how N.T. Wright said it in his book, After You Believe. He said, and with all these things, it may bring faith, not necessarily by speaking of Jesus all the time, though there will be such opportunities, but by living Jesus in public. Kind of pretty sure that's what Peter was getting at. Thanks for stopping by. Grace and peace to you. I'll see you next time.